Okay, here we go. Finally, gonna fire this thing up for the first time. I had it running for about 5 seconds and didn't have a radiator hooked up. Got everything sealed up, got my hoses. It's full of water, full of oil. I couldn't find any exhaust, so what I did was I bought a couple pipes from O'Reilly's and just hammered them out. And then took a muffler clamp and then welded some tabs on here just so I can get some exhaust. It's not much exhaust, but it's away from my O2 sensor, the open air, because you got to get a good reading, and you can't have that O2 sensor that close to open air and get a constant, get a good valid reading. So here it is. This is the story. This is a 5.7 Hemi. I pieced everything together, changed the valve covers and the coils. Somebody on the LX Swap Meet forum on Facebook, the Facebook page, had some coils for sale. Got the valve covers off of eBay new. Um, had to go through a couple engines to get a good one complete because probably have about $750 in Hemis right here, which is pretty good. This one had a bad cam. What happened was the cam, number 3 cam bearing seized up and ran dry, so it sheared the pin off, and it wasn't. This is the one I created a video earlier with the flames shooting out of the exhaust. So this one had a bad cam, so that block has to be boiled out, but the crank, it looks like all the pistons are good. This other one here, this one was a $250 engine. What happened with this one is it dropped an intake valve seat. That piston got torn up, and then it broke up the pieces and shot through the intake manifold. More pieces to that piston and that piston. So the heads are shot. Looks like 3 pistons are shot. These are those MSD solenoids which you want to get rid of and just put plugs in. Had to yank them out with a lag bolt, but they busted up. But you're gonna get new plugs from the dealer anyway and plug those up. So this is the story on this one. It's got a flywheel, a conversion flywheel. These are the exhaust manifolds off of an 07 Chrysler 300. They came with the engine. I've got a K-frame under here, and I got it clearance just to fit the stock steering box. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this yet. I might have to hang it on the side of the fender. So what I've got here, stock pump. What I did was go to the junkyard and get a Chrysler Cirrus Stratus compressor because the other compressor was too long. It was hitting the TTI mount. So I made my own little bracket here. Welded some studs that I got at the hardware store. The correct diameter, the correct thread for the bolts that came with the compressor. So yeah, everything else is stock front, 5.7. You take this fitting off, and there's a spring in there, so I'm trying shortening the spring to see if it survives, if the power steering box survives with reduced pressure. So this is it. These are brass fittings. I tapped and threaded the holes so I can hook my heater up once I get it back in the car. This is my modified drive-by-wire. I've got pictures in the G3 swap page on Facebook showing how I took the cover off, welded the spline shaft on, and now this is the mechanical throttle body. So this is it. This is my idle air control. All that does is work the valve. and it adds air. This is going to go to the air cleaner. This just adds air to the intake. I've got running this. It's the MSD6. It's got all the plugs to plug into the coils. It's got the cam sensor, the map sensor, the crank sensor. Everything plugs right into all the fittings you have. I mean the sensors you have. For my fuel, I've got this EZ-EFI box. You can get those on eBay. This one I got for $189 on eBay. And then the wiring harness I made up, but you can get those on eBay too. They come up used all the time. Just last month I got a complete F.A.S.T EZ-EFI. This is version 1. They call it EZ-EFI fuel now with all the sensors. It was about I think it was $560. They're about 900 and something new. It's a multi-port kit. And then here's a whole wiring harness for the same multi-port kit I just picked up off of eBay, $150. So yeah, originally I bought one of these from F.A.S.T. He charged me $270, but that was about 5 years ago. So here we go. This thing on my engine stand here. Let me turn on the ignition, my battery. We're gonna fire this thing up for the first time, where I can have it running for any length of time. So master switch is on. I'm going to show you how to program this guy. This is my oil pressure light. I always have a switch for oil pressure switch. This is just to show I have ignition on or power to this box. So this EZ-EFI, let's set this guy up like it's brand new, and then we're going to fire this. This here is just my EZ-EFI needs a tach signal, so it knows how fast the engine's spinning, so it can start injecting the injectors, firing the injectors. So here we go. Let's reset this guy. Turn on the box. So I'll reset. Okay, setup wizard. You start with, that's how easy this thing is. It's self-tuned, so I'm going to say select. Start a new tune, yes. Reset ECU to base tune, we're going to say yes. Okay, engine cubic inches 345. I think it starts at 350, but with this I already set it up once, but I'm showing how to set it from the beginning. RPM, idle speed 750. This is, I'm not using their throttle body. This is a custom, so I go to other. Number of injectors 8. These are injector flow at 43 psi. These are stock injectors. I'm not sure what they're set to, but I think normally the pressure on a 5.7 is 58. So I'm going to set this down. I'm going to say the flow is probably around, let's just make a guess and say 30. Because it doesn't really matter. It's going to just start learning wherever I set this guy. So let's say 30. Fuel pressure is set to 43 psi. And then I'm going to say done. Done. Okay, calibrate TPS. So with throttle at idle position, hit continue. And it's just reading the voltage, sitting at idle. Alright, so this is where we hold this all the way to full. I'm going to try to do this with one hand here. Hold it to full throttle. I'm going to hit continue. Hope you can see that. and then close throttle. All right, so continue. This is where we started up. I wanted to point out my fuel system I've got here right now, okay? I had showed this in the prior video, but this is how simple this is. It comes off my fuel cell, and then it goes down to my pre-filter. It goes down to my cheapo fuel pump, which usually run it off, it's like an 89 to 92 Ford Econoline van. They're usually mounted underneath the seat on the frame. It's just like an E2000 if you were to look it up on the web. Cheap pump. EFI filter. It goes up to my cheapo regulator. You can get these on eBay for about $22. And then I've got the pressure running up to another filter, because I've had this thing apart so many times I don't want any dirt going in there. And then it's just going into one of these cheap fittings, which I got off of it's in the help section of O'Reilly's or AutoZone. It's just a hose bung on one end and it snaps onto the factory fitting on the rail. So this is set to 43. I've got a test button up here which primes my pump. So if you can see that, I've got the regulator set to 43, and this is also vacuum referenced. So with this EZ-EFI, you need another map sensor, because the first map, the original map sensor, goes to the MSD 6 to control the timing. And then I added this GM map. It's a single bar map sensor, and that runs to my EZ-EFI. Okay, so real simple. But once I get this thing in the car, I don't like this deadhead system. So what I did was I went on eBay, found a full set of rails here, $160, just plain bare rails. And what I'm going to do the return line style, where it's pressurized on one side, it goes through, it loops to the other side, comes back, and then this side goes to my regulator, and the other end of the regulator goes back to the tank. Because I always run this style, so it's always circulating fuel, not just one of these deadheads. Okay, so let's see if this thing cranks up. I've got open headers on this thing, so I've got the ear muffs. We'll put these on for a second. Let's see if this thing fires up. So here we go. All we do is hit the start button. So that's it. First time I had this thing running. It's smoking a little bit because I had oil in all the cylinders. I had oil on all the bolts. I had a lot of water in this thing because when I first jigged this thing up, I forgot to put. Well, I put the water pump together just to get the belts and pulleys all lined up for the AC compressor, but I thought, oh, I'll put the gasket in there later when I mount everything up and finalize all the torque on all the bolts. So I forgot about not having the water pump gasket in there. As soon as I started filling this thing up with water, it's just sprouting leaks everywhere. But that's it. This is to show that this thing fits on the factory K-frame. It fits with the factory power steering box. We're gonna get this thing in this Cuda once I get it all painted up, but it's to show, this is to show how easy this thing is to work with not the non-factory wiring. This is just the MSD6. You can get that on eBay. I got it on eBay for $450 used. I got EZ-EFI box for $189 without any sensors. So these are all GM sensors that we add. This was, I think, 40 bucks off of Craigslist or eBay. It's just a GM. It's just to give it idle air control with the motor. Okay, so you can hook this thing up anywhere on the intake just to add air. Regulator was $22 off of eBay. You can see them all there all day long. GM map. There's a GM water temp sensor down there. O2 sensor. This is off of Nissan Altima. They're in junkyards. You can get them on eBay. Nissan Altima, I think it's an 05, 2.5 liter engine. It uses a wideband, so you can find them in junkyards. You can buy them brand new off of eBay. They're about $70. You might even be able to find them cheaper, but that's it. This thing's running. I'm going to let it run a little bit more. It looks like it needs a return. I need a stronger return spring on this because it's got a little bit of a, there's no adjustment screw, but it's hanging open a little bit where the idle is a little high. So I'm going to put a spring on here when I hook that up to a cable to the gas pedal. But this is to show that that works. I've got brass fittings I got from Lowe's or Home Depot to run my heater hoses to the factory heater control valve in a Cuda. So this one is tapped and it comes out of the back. This one is tapped and I've got a 45 degree on there, or it's a 90, just so I can have my hoses out. I've got a 1/2 inch barb on one side, a 5/8 barb on the other side. So it had these out coming out of the back of the engine, but I'd have to cut them and weld them at the correct position so that they'd face out the back. But I wanted my stock heater control valve, which sits about right here on the fender, to be hooked up to the original hoses. So that's it. I wasn't showing the right voltage on my little voltmeter here, so I'm thinking this alternator was bad. But I've got 2 alternators that came with one of these engines. So we're going to try the other alternator. I was able to get that tested up at O'Reilly's and it was fine. This alternator they couldn't test because it didn't have this connector in their little test kit, but this is the same connector that's on those little MDS solenoids. So since I'm not using them, I just chopped off the connector and plugged it in. So there we go. This thing's wanted to show how easy this is to get running. I think this was a little handheld deal. There's a new one that came out from F.A.S.T. that gives you more cold enrichment settings when the thing temperature isn't up to temperature yet for cold start. But mine works fine. These are, I think I got this $59 on eBay. But that's it. It's to show you this thing's running. I'm glad it's running. Quickie, this is off of the Jeep. I got this off of eBay and the on the Facebook LX swap forums. It's my oil pressure light sending unit. This oil filter is for the same one I use on my 2010 Dodge Challenger 3.5 engine. It screws right on. It's got the same threads for this adapter, and it screws right on. So it may even fit the stock oil filter location, but I'm not sure. It looks like it might hit the K-frame here. So I don't want to modify anything there, and this fits right on. This hose came with the engine. I think he said it was a 07 Chrysler 300 with a 5.7 in it. And this is a standard big block radiator. So all I had to do was get a flex hose up at the auto parts store to go from that to the normal big block location. This was a 1 3/4 inch fitting on the big block radiator. I had to heat this up a little bit and grease the hose before I can slide that on there, because that hose is originally for a 1.5 inch fitting, and this is 1 3/4. So it worked. I heated up a little bit with a torch or a heat gun, greased it up, and I just kept working it until I got that baby on there. And saves you a lot of time having to find a hose or get a custom radiator, because this was a radiator I had in my stock. So that's it. If I can think of anything else, I'll post it up. All this wiring gets cleaned up once I mount everything in the car. But wanted to show you guys that this thing is running. So sorry about the big mess, but it took 3 engines to get one good one running. But remember, I only paid $750 for one, and then $75 trading parts for the other one. So I have less than $1,000 in all these parts. So here we go. This is going on YouTube and the G3 Facebook page. G3 Hemi Swap page on Facebook. Thanks, guys.